Ever get that shiver down your spine when you hear the word cult?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like this primal fear
Yeah.
almost. Yeah. It's fascinating though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Today we're diving deep into the world of cults and how they manipulate people.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a great lineup of sources for this deep dive. We've got insights from psychology experts like Mark Travers and the amazing Dr. Janja Lalich.
Oh, she's brilliant.
Yeah, and we'll even touch upon the Jonestown Massacre to illustrate just how devastating this can be.
Right.
So our mission today is to give you the knowledge to spot those red flags and protect yourself and your loved ones. Because let's face it, cults aren't always as obvious as you know.
You'd think they'd be wearing like hooded robes in a secluded forest or something.
Exactly, but they can be hiding in plain sight. Like, have you ever been to one of those,
Oh, like a self-help seminar?
yes, or those fitness studios that are kind of culty?
Oh, yeah. Or even some of those multi-level marketing schemes that promise you the world.
Totally. It's like they know how to push our buttons.
It's true. And that's because when we talk about cults, we're not just talking about fringe religious groups.
So, like, what exactly are we dealing with here? When we say cult, what does that actually mean?
A cult is any group with a specific set of characteristics, often centered around a charismatic leader who demands total devotion. It's a system of control designed to limit critical thinking and isolate members from the outside world.
So they basically want to control how you think and who you talk to.
Exactly. And they often have this belief system that's presented as the only lie truth. Whether it's spiritual, financial, or even self-improvement, it doesn't matter. It's their way or the highway.
Okay, so power and control are the name of the game. But how do they get people to sign up for that?
They're incredibly good at what they do. They exploit our basic human needs. Belonging, purpose, meaning cults, offer this seductive cocktail that can be hard to resist.
Especially if you're feeling a bit lost or alone, right? It's like they offer a sense of community that can be really alluring.
Absolutely. Alan Tate Wood had this article in New Statesman, and he said that these groups are like predators. They can sense when someone is vulnerable and they pounce.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then there are those MLMs we hear about all the time.
Oh, yeah, those multi-level marketing companies.
Right. I read this article a while back about how they use these cult-like tactics, and it was eye-opening.
Oh, totally. Like that Mary Kay example, remember?
Yes, it really showed how similar those tactics can be.
Well, it's like they both target the same vulnerabilities.
Exactly. The desire for financial freedom, wanting to be part of a supportive group, the allure of personal growth.
Yeah.
It's all there.
They hook you with the promise of easy money and a supportive community, but the pressure to recruit can be intense. They've always got you chasing these crazy quotas.
Whether it's a cult or an MLM using those similar tactics, they've definitely got a playbook.
Definitely. They're not just winging it. They're using psychology to manipulate people.
Okay, so we've established that these groups aren't just messing around. They're playing a calculated game. And to understand that game, we need to understand those psychological mechanisms they use. So it's like these groups, cults, MLMs, they've got this whole, like a how-to manual for messing with your mind.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Totally. But to really protect ourselves, we need to understand that playbook.
Exactly. We need to know what we're up against.
Okay, so let's break it down. Mark Travers, he's a psychology expert we're looking at today. He talks about these three main ways cults manipulate people.
Yeah, he calls them the three core mechanisms of cult influence:
And those are?
cognitive dissonance, social influence, and manipulation.
Okay, so three big words, but I think we can handle them.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay, so first up, cognitive dissonance. Now, I feel like we've all experienced this one, even if we've never joined a cult, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's that feeling you get when, like, you have two beliefs that clash, or when you do something that goes against your values. It just creates this icky feeling inside.
Exactly, like that buyer's remorse after a big purchase. You know you shouldn't have spent the money, but you try to convince yourself you love that new whatever it is.
Yes. Or staying in a bad relationship way longer than you should. You know it's not good for you, but you justify it in your mind. That's cognitive dissonance.
So how do cults use this to their advantage?
They're masters at creating these closed systems. So like the cult's doctrine, their teachings, it becomes the only truth, right? And any information from the outside world, anything that challenges their beliefs, is seen as a threat.
So if you start to question the leader, or something just doesn't feel right, boom, cognitive dissonance kicks in.
Exactly. It's like this internal alarm bell going off. But instead of listening to that alarm, cult members are often told to silence it, to doubt their own instinct.
Which is the opposite of what you should do in that situation.
Right.
Right. If something feels off, it probably is.
But cults thrive on getting people to ignore those red flags, and they do it by using things like thought-stopping techniques.
Thought-stopping techniques. Sounds intense. What's that all about?
It's basically any method they use to shut down critical thinking. Like if a doubt pops into your head, they might tell you to repeat a mantra or chant or even engage in some kind of physical activity to distract you from that thought.
Wow, it's like they're trying to rewire your brain.
Hmm.
And speaking of rewiring, what about that second mechanism? Social influence. It sounds like classic peer pressure.
It is peer pressure, but on steroids. Cults exploit our deep-seated need to belong.
Which, let's be honest, we all crave that to some extent.
Of course we're social creatures. We want to feel accepted, loved, valued.
So cults tap into that, and they twist it to their advantage.
Exactly. They create these incredibly tight-knit communities. Think about it. You join this group, and suddenly you're surrounded by people who seem to have it all figured out. They're happy, they're fulfilled, they accept you unconditionally. It's intoxicating.
But that kind of acceptance, it always comes with a price, doesn't it?
Always. And that price is your independence, your critical thinking, your connection to the outside world.
And that's where the isolation comes in, right? They don't want you talking to anyone who might challenge their beliefs.
Exactly. They might tell you your family and friends are toxic or that they don't understand the group's teachings. So you end up cutting off those ties, those lifelines to the outside world, and you become completely dependent on the cult for your social needs.
That's terrifying. Okay, so we've got cognitive dissonance, the mental tug-of-war, and social influence, the pressure of the group. What about that third mechanism? Manipulation.
Well, manipulation is the umbrella term, really. It's the how. Like cognitive dissonance and social influence are manipulation is the how they actually pull it off. And cults use a whole arsenal of techniques to get inside your head.
So what kind of techniques are we talking about here?
Well, think about Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion.
Remind me what those are again.
Okay, so there's reciprocity. You do something for me, I do something for you. Cults use this all the time. Like they'll give you a small gift or do you a favor, and then boom, you feel obligated to return the favor.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like I owe them something now.
Exactly. And then there's commitment and consistency. They get you to make small commitments at first, like attending a meeting or volunteering. But then those small commitments escalate over time, and before you know it, you've dedicated your entire life to the group.
It's like they're slowly reeling you in.
Right. And the more you commit, the harder it is to walk away. It's like you've invested so much, you don't want to admit it was all for nothing. They also use social proof. If everyone else is doing it, it must be right, right?
Right. And since everyone in the group is agreeing with the leader, it's hard to be the one to speak up.
Exactly. They make it seem like everyone's on board, even if they're not. And then, of course, you have authority.
Oh, like the leader is some kind of all-knowing guru.
Right. They might claim to have special powers or knowledge, or they might surround themselves with symbols of authority to make themselves seem more credible.
Like wearing those special robes or having everyone call them by a special title.
Exactly. It's all about creating an illusion of authority. And lastly, you have scarcity. They create this sense of urgency, like if you don't join now, you'll miss out on something amazing.
It's like those limited time offers that make you act impulsively. You don't want to miss out, so you buy it even if you don't really need it.
Oh, yeah. They create this fear of missing out that can be really powerful.
Wow, it's like a whole psychology lesson packed into one.
It really is. Cults have this stuff down to a science.
Okay, so we've covered the 3 main ways cults manipulate people. Cognitive dissonance, social influence, and all those sneaky manipulation tactics. Okay, so we've gone pretty deep on the psychology of how cults operate. But now for the big question. How can we actually spot these groups and protect ourselves?
Well, the good news is that knowledge is power.
Right. Forewarned is forearmed, as they say.
Exactly. And thankfully, Dr. Lalich, she actually provides us with a really good list of those red flags to watch out for.
Hit us with those red flags. What should we be on the lookout for?
One of the biggest and most obvious ones is excessive devotion to a leader. Like, if you've got a group that demands unquestioning obedience and punishes anyone who disagrees.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for sure. And it goes back to that cognitive dissonance we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Like if you start to question the leader, you feel this intense guilt and self-doubt.
Absolutely, because the leader is supposed to be infallible. Questioning them is like questioning the whole system. And cults don't tolerate that kind of dissent.
It's like they want to control every aspect of your life.
Oh, yeah. Daniel Oren, he had this fascinating article about cult leaders and how they use charisma to manipulate people.
Yeah, I think I read that one. It's like there are these master manipulators hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. So always be wary of that. Another big red flag is isolation.
Right. If they're discouraging you from talking to family and friends or trying to control what information you Have access to.
Exactly. They want to be your only source of information and support. Because the more isolated you are, the more dependent you become on the group.
It's like they're trapping you in their web.
Exactly. And then you have those mind-altering practices that some groups use.
Oh, you mean like excessive meditation or chanting or something like that?
Yeah, things that can kind of put you in a trance-like state.
Okay, yeah, that definitely sounds like something to watch out for.
It can be really dangerous in the wrong hands because it makes you more susceptible to suggestion.
Wow, it's like they're trying to brainwash you.
In a way, they are. So those are just a few of the red flags to be aware of. But I think it's also important to talk about the real-world consequences of cult involvement. And for that, we have to talk about the Jonestown Massacre.
Yeah, that's a really tragic example of how bad things can get.
It really is. Over 900 people died, including hundreds of children.
It's hard to even fathom that.
It's heartbreaking, and it all stemmed from the influence of one man, Jim Jones.
He was a very charismatic leader, wasn't he?
He was. And he initially drew people in with messages of hope and equality. But over time, he became increasingly paranoid and controlling.
And that's when things took a really dark turn.
They did. He demanded absolute obedience from his followers. And those who questioned him were punished.
It's chilling how one person can have that much power over others.
It is. But it all goes back to those psychological mechanisms we've been talking about. Cognitive dissonance, social influence, manipulation, they were all at play in Jonestown.
It's like a cautionary tale about the dangers of these groups.
It really is. But it's also a reminder that we can protect ourselves by being aware of the dangers.
Right. Knowledge is power. So, as we wrap up this, what are some key takeaways our listeners should remember? What can they do to protect themselves and their loved ones?
Trust your gut. If something feels off about a group, it probably is.
Don't ignore those red flags.
Exactly. Do your research. Talk to people outside of the group. And remember, you always have a choice.
That's so important. Cults thrive on making you feel like you have no other options. But you always have a choice.
Always. And if you're ever feeling unsure or pressured, reach out for help.
There's no shame in that. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
True. And remember, cults can happen anywhere, to anyone.
So stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay connected to the people who care about you.
Because those connections, those genuine bonds with loved ones, those are our best defense against these harmful groups.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope this episode has empowered you to spot those red flags and protect yourself and your loved ones. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and as always, thanks for listening.